Following the 9/11 attacks, the United States launched Operation Enduring Freedom, triggering a new era of covert operations across the Afghanistan-Pakistan border. By late 2009, the remote tribal lands of Waziristan, long regarded as an untouchable sanctuary for Al-Qaeda and Taliban commanders, had become the center of America's most aggressive intelligence campaign. The CIA established clandestine listening posts along the border, and inside those deadly mountains, they cultivated informants who risked everything to pass along whispers of insurgent movements. One man was central to this effort, Dr. Humam Khalil al-Balawi, a Jordanian physician turned intelligence asset. Initially recruited by Jordan's GID and later integrated into CIA operations, his mission was straightforward: infiltrate al-Qaeda networks and help locate Ayman al-Zawahiri, believed to be hiding in Waziristan. His reports were remarkably convincing. CIA analysts believe he had access to high-ranking operatives, possibly even couriers who traveled between al-Qaeda's Shiraz deep in the mountains. To support him, the CIA quietly built an underground network of tribal intermediaries and signal sources stretching into Waziristan. This network provided real-time surveillance on movement routes, supply channels, and safe houses. Though operating beyond U.S. military reach, their intelligence shaped targeted drone strikes and special forces raids. Reports from this network elevated al-Balawi to near-legend status inside Langley's counterterrorism center. By December, he claimed he was prepared to deliver precise intelligence on al-Zawahiri's location near Shawal Valley in North Waziristan. The opportunity was too significant to ignore. It could lead to the removal of al-Qaeda's most senior strategist. That is when the CIA made a fateful decision to bring the asset physically into forward operating base FOB Chapman and Cost, trusting his loyalty so deeply that security protocols were reduced. Al-Balawi, seen as America's voice inside enemy walls, informed handlers he was planning high-level tribal meetings to finalize tracking of al-Zawahiri. To facilitate this, an intricate chain of contacts extended into South Waziristan, where militants reportedly relied on discreet radio communications. His signal, analysts believed, was the sound of imminent breakthrough. But inside these mountains, loyalty was currency, and surveillance could be a form of camouflage. As the CIA prepared to welcome him in person, al-Balawi composed a final message from Pakistani soil that seemed hopeful. In reality, it was his last transmission before stepping onto FOB Chapman. What the CIA didn't know was this: the network they helped build had already realigned. Their source had crossed the line. He wasn't carrying information into Chapman, he was carrying a bomb. Inside FOB Chapman, a converted Soviet-era outpost near the Pakistan border, anticipation eclipsed caution. The CIA team stationed there specialized in tracking high-value targets through covert tribal links in North and South Waziristan. Their most promising asset, Source X, later confirmed as Humam al-Balawi, was expected to arrive carrying breakthrough intelligence. Some believed he even possessed coordinates for a meeting involving Zawahiri. Security checks were loosened. That decision was critical. Standard-based procedures required all incoming persons, including assets, to be searched thoroughly outside the perimeter. But al-Balawi was considered too valuable, too trusted. Jordanian intelligence vouched deeply for him, and CIA teams feared that treating him like a suspect might disrupt their fragile relationship and jeopardize the chance to eliminate al-Qaeda leadership. He was escorted directly into the heart of the base. 7 CIA officers, a Jordanian handler, and 1 security specialist approached the vehicle that brought him in. According to the declassified Department of Defense and CIA internal investigations, he refused to exit the vehicle, citing medical discomfort. Personnel moved closer to ease him out. At that moment, he detonated. The explosion killed 7 CIA officers and wounding 6 others, making it one of the deadliest attacks in CIA history. Among those killed was Jennifer Matthews, chief of base operations, and multiple top field operatives who had been embedded in cross-border tracking efforts. The Jordanian handler also died instantly. Investigators later determined that al-Balawi was operating under al-Qaeda's direction, having been turned long before his arrival. His communications to CIA handlers were strategic manipulations, timed to exploit the agency's hunger for proximity to al-Qaeda command. The very network that the CIA helped construct inside Waziristan, its signal interceptors, its tribal sources, its covert radio relays, had become a tool for deception. Later intelligence assessments found evidence that al-Qaeda operatives may have fed al-Balawi misinformation in controlled doses to build credibility and lure senior intelligence figures into the open. The detonation didn't just end lives. It crippled a highly developed human intelligence pipeline that took years to assemble. The message was clear. In the immediate aftermath of the cost bombing, CIA headquarters activated one of the most urgent breach assessments in agency history. For years, the clandestine network developed across Waziristan had operated in shades of reliability, part tribal whispers, part satellite interception, part covert ground detection. Now, this network was under question. Analysis began with a fundamental realization. The intelligence stream didn't fail. It was intentionally redirected. Investigators discovered that al-Balawi had progressively gained influence over the data streams coming from Waziristan, acting as a central filter of information. He forwarded intelligence that aligned with existing CIA target theories, particularly movements attributed to al-Zawahiri near the Shawal Valley. This misled analysts into believing network accuracy was improving instead of being weaponized. The CIA identified that multiple nodes in the intelligence chain had quietly shifted allegiance, some due to coercion by militant commanders, others due to ideological pressure. Militant elements embedded within tribal communities realized early that leveraging intelligence was more effective than suppressing it. A documented case mentioned in post-bomb analysis described a signal burst detected in late 2009, believed to be related to an Al-Qaeda courier's movement. Initially attributed to resistance radio chatter, it was later confirmed to be a staged transmission from militants, designed to reinforce al-Balawi's credibility. During cross-agency debriefs, CIA analysts pinpointed two contributing factors: over-reliance on personal source intelligence in an environment ruled by loyalty shifts, failure to conduct counter-surveillance on assets operating deep within opposition sanctuaries. Meanwhile, nearly 7,000 miles away, drone operations intensified over Waziristan. In January 2010 alone, 14 drone strikes were launched, targeting compounds believed connected to al-Balawi's network. Several confirmed Al-Qaeda operatives were killed, but none linked directly to the bomb's planning. The incident further strained CIA-ISI relations. While Pakistan's ISI agreed to share certain field insights, they also emphasized a long-standing warning. Control cannot be guaranteed over mountain loyalties. Inside Langley, the shock of losing seasoned operatives forced a systemic shift. The CIA introduced new human validation procedures, requiring parallel verification of field reports through electronic surveillance and secondary human sources. One line from the internal evaluation report became notable among operatives. "We built a network to listen. Instead, it learned how to speak." By March 2010, it was clear that the network originally designed to locate adversaries had instead revealed vulnerabilities within U.S. intelligence doctrine. That realization led to a drastic recalibration of CIA operations in the region, one that would redefine how intel was collected, verified, and interpreted. But before the recalibration began, one question haunted every assessment. Was al-Balawi the only turncoat, or was he just the first one we noticed? In the months following the Kos disaster, the CIA's counterterrorism strategy underwent critical transformation. Key field operatives, still reeling emotionally from the loss of colleagues, shifted from aggressive asset pursuit to defensive intelligence validation. The crisis had exposed the single point of failure in their Waziristan network: trust without verification. To prevent a repeat of al-Balawi, the CIA implemented a dual-stream intelligence protocol. From that point forward, every human-sourced report from tribal intermediaries or embedded informants had to be independently cross-matched with SIGINT from NSA drone-mounted sensors and long-range thermal mapping via Q9 Reaper platforms. But correcting the system came with consequences. Signals began to silence. Sources who had once eagerly transmitted movement patterns across militant routes near Mir Ali and Lada abruptly disappeared from radio frequencies. Some were later confirmed to have been killed in internal Taliban purges. Others simply faded back into local life, no longer willing to risk accusations of espionage. CIA operatives described this phase as mountain blackout. Yet amid the blackout, one anomaly emerged. Independent signals analysis in mid-2010 detected fragmented couriers crossing from Shakai Valley into eastern South Waziristan, bypassing known militant checkpoints. The NSA identified that these movements lacked encrypted chatter, typically associated with high-value target relocation. That led to suspicion. Perhaps the network silence was not collapse, but reorientation. The decision was made to re-enter Waziristan intelligence theater, but this time through observer mode, not network engagement. Instead of pushing sources to infiltrate, the CIA began mapping the network's fractures. Teams analyzed local radio silence patterns alongside movement corridors previously supported by their network. Based purely on observable traffic changes, they discovered routes shifting eastward, suggesting a withdrawal from prior targeted zones. The network hadn't died. It had adapted away from signal environments compromised by the CIA's own reliance on contact-based intelligence. A classified interagency meeting in September 2010 recorded the following assessment. The network behaves like a living organism. When exposed to threat, it retracts and regrows along safer paths. We are not dealing with static links. We are tracking adaptation. Efforts to rebuild internal surveillance succeeded in limited measure, thanks to aerial monitoring. But without human verification, drone coordinates were often insufficient to confirm targets. This led to fewer operations but higher precision rates, marking a shift in U.S. counterterrorism ethos. Strike less, strike correctly. The psychological impact of cost was still felt. Every new lead came with hesitation. Every potential walk-in with layered scrutiny. And in the unseen valleys of Waziristan, something was stirring, quietly, strategically. The network was not gone. It was waiting for someone new to listen. By late 2010, the intelligence blackout over Waziristan had become both a weakness and a strategic forcing mechanism. With human networks compromised and tribal loyalties now skewed by fear of militant reprisal, the CIA reshaped its regional intelligence framework. Rather than rebuilding the same communication-laced spy pipeline, they began shifting into pattern-of-life surveillance, aerial reconnaissance at scale, studying not what informants said, but how people moved when no one was supposed to be watching. One particular pattern caught attention. Drones captured irregular travel between North Waziristan and Abbottabad, far from previous operational shadows. The route bypassed known militant command centers, avoiding the Shawal Valley track, typically preferred by Taliban and al-Qaeda messengers. The small convoys moved under night cover, avoiding checkpoints believed to be Taliban-controlled. This suggested they were bypassing militants, not operating under them. It was a departure from Waziristan's historical militant command flow. Initially dismissed as irrelevant smuggler transit, the move and analysis gained urgency after cross-referencing with al-Qaeda courier trails, confirmed through communications intercepts, details declassified in the 2012 DoD Intelligence Review. One of these couriers matched an individual al-Balawi, once referenced indirectly in his messages, a silent transporter, unarmed, trusted by high command. Ironically, information initially delivered by the man who betrayed the CIA became part of the puzzle that led to Osama bin Laden's discovery. A senior CIA official later admitted under closed inquiry, "We didn't trust al-Balawi, not after what he did. But what he reported before cost still had value. We just had to carefully filter it. We realized he had named people who existed. He simply hid their true purpose." Throughout early 2011, intelligence analysts observed sustained low-visibility activity into Abbottabad, originating from sectors previously monitored by the collapsed network in Waziristan. As U.S. focus narrowed, the CIA's internal doctrine shifted from relying on tribal sources to correlating historic human with emerging technological patterns. This doctrinal shift, forced by betrayal, ultimately set the foundation for Operation Neptune Spear, the raid that killed Osama bin Laden on May 2, 2011. Though no direct operational trail came from al-Balawi, the breakdown of the CIA's tribal intelligence network forced analysts to pivot towards the courier-based lead that ultimately pinpointed bin Laden's compound. The absence of human reporting from Waziristan compelled deeper reliance on drone imaging, intercepted communications, and signal vacuum mapping, tracking environmental silence around high-value targets. The underground network in Waziristan never rose again in the way it once existed. It couldn't. Its exposure had altered the balance. But its failures created a new strategic lens. A CIA internal note from June 2011 stated, "We lost the people who listened. But in losing them, we learned how to watch." Pakistan's ISI remained publicly uninformed of operational specifics. Diplomatic friction increased following the raid, especially as it appeared bin Laden was living near a military academy. While ISI denied knowledge, internal U.S. debriefs remained cautious but non-conclusive. The lesson that haunted intelligence briefings throughout 2011 was simple. Networks built in hostile terrain cannot be owned. Only observed. Managed at best. Never trusted. And in Waziristan, remnants of the once elusive spy pipeline remained active. But, as one analyst said after reviewing late-phase intercepts, they no longer speak to us. They speak about us. The mountains were still carrying signals. But now the CIA chose silence and the shadows in which to listen. When the rotor blades faded into the night sky over Abbottabad on May 2, 2011, America declared mission accomplished. Osama bin Laden was dead. Across newsrooms, the operation was celebrated as surgical and decisive. But inside the CIA's counterterrorism center at Langley, the mood was more complex. The strike had closed the chapter that began in Waziristan, but it didn't erase the one that led to cost. Because the raid's success wasn't built on the network that once whispered from the mountains, it was built on what happened after the network stopped speaking. The betrayal at FOB Chapman forced a transformation. Once the underground links in Waziristan collapsed, analysts stopped chasing voices and started tracking patterns. They shifted from depending on spoken intelligence to studying movement, silence, and environmental behavior. What they couldn't hear, they started to see. And what once was fed through informants now emerged from drone logs, heat signatures, and courier mapping. They stopped listening for information and started watching for absence of noise. Strangely, some of the leads that contributed to identifying bin Laden's courier had originated in references al-Balawi made before the cost attack, fragments tucked into layers of disinformation. He spoke of a silent transporter, someone unarmed, respected, not watched. At the time, his handlers saw it as a minor note. Only years later, after his betrayal forced a reassessment, did those fragments resurface. They didn't lead directly to Abbottabad, but they helped recognize the courier pattern that eventually did. Internal reports later admitted it plainly. Before cost, we trusted our asset to guide us. After cost, we used what he said to teach us what not to believe. The network that once promised access had instead taught the agency a different survival rule: to verify intelligence against its silence, not its sound. Attempts to re-establish the original spy network inside Waziristan were short-lived. Those few who tried to resume contact either vanished, were found executed, or deliberately cut communication. Soon after the al-Balawi incident, militants began practicing reverse signal detection, monitoring radio silence and sudden shifts to identify possible informants. Tribal collaborators feared even being noticed. The CIA began profiling intelligence not by what was shared, but whether sharing seemed too convenient. A classified training module for new operatives later summarized this with chilling brevity: trust is operational risk. Validation is survival. By 2012, the CIA no longer attempted to rebuild a singular human source in the region. Instead, they adapted to operating without an informant system they could control. Intelligence became modular. Human signals were only accepted if supported by satellite, drone, or secondary human sources. Each piece of intelligence required triangulation. One analyst described the shift like this: we replaced informants with footprints. Then we replaced footprints with shadows. Pakistan's ISI, though publicly unaware of the Abbottabad mission, privately acknowledged one truth during later intelligence security dialogues: tribal regions could be influenced, watched, even agitated, but never owned. Those mountains had hosted empires, armies, and intelligence networks long before America entered their airspace. Each time control was attempted, the terrain adapted. A retired CIA officer who supervised the post-cost restructuring once said, "We didn't lose the Waziristan network. We lost the illusion that it ever belonged to us." In 2014, a portion of the CIA's operational retrospective was declassified. It concluded that while the former network did yield valuable breakthroughs, its structural failure forced innovation that led to bin Laden's discovery. The final line was left unredacted not by accident, but as a reminder to future generations of intelligence officers. In the mountains of Waziristan, alliances echo deeper than promises. The signal we once trusted now watches us from the other side. Even today, when reconnaissance drones rise above those remote peaks and infrared scanners sweep the ridgelines, operators still listen, not for sound, but for changes in patterns, in silence, in timing. Because one lesson remains constant since the day al-Balawi walked into Chapman. You may build an intelligence network deep inside hostile territory. You may give it radios, relays, safe houses, encrypted access. You may trust it to carry your signal. But once the network learns how powerful information can be, it will choose for itself who hears what and when. And in those mountains, where loyalty is older than war, History has proven this repeatedly. You don't command a network in Waziristan. You're allowed to borrow it until the mountains decide you've heard enough.